There's a moment that happens every day, usually between two notifications, or right after you close a laptop, or just before you reach for your phone again. Nothing is wrong yet, nothing has been named, but something tightens. Not enough to alarm you, just enough to keep you moving. You don't call it stress, you don't call it anxiety, you barely notice it at all. You simply continue. Most of adult life is lived here, in this thin space where everything is fine, and yet you're subtly holding yourself together. This video isn't here to interrupt that, and it's not here to fix it. It's here to slow that moment down, not to analyze it, but to let you notice what was already present before effort showed up. This isn't something to watch quickly. If you stay, you may recognize that some of what you've been managing was never unstable to begin with. And once that's seen, it's difficult to return to the old way of carrying yourself. Have you noticed how often the day asks you to stay composed? Not in dramatic ways, in small ones. A meeting runs long, you adjust your tone, a message feels off, you pause before replying, someone asks how you're doing. You answer with just enough honesty to stay functional. Nothing feels forced, and yet, something is always being managed. It doesn't feel like a decision you made, more like a rule you inherited. Somewhere along the way, you learned that staying steady is part of being reliable, that handling yourself quietly is a form of maturity. So you keep an eye on your thoughts, you smooth your reactions, you make sure nothing leaks out at the wrong time. And most of the time, this works. Life stays organized, relationships stay intact, you stay effective. But every contract has a cost, even the invisible ones. What's interesting is how rarely this agreement is questioned, not because it's wrong, but because it's everywhere. Work rewards it, social settings expect it, even rest is often approached as something to do correctly. So the monitoring becomes constant, gentle, almost polite. And at some point, it starts to feel normal to be slightly tense even when nothing is happening. Not a problem yet, just a background posture. And that's worth noticing. Not to change it, but to see it clearly for the first time. Why does this way of living feel so reasonable? If someone asked you when you learned it, there wouldn't be a clear answer. It wasn't taught in a single moment, it was absorbed. You watched who got praised, who stayed calm under pressure, who didn't take things personally. You noticed that people who kept it together were trusted more, promoted more, left alone more. So you learned to keep certain reactions private, not to suppress them, just to store them somewhere quiet. Even technology trains this reflex, unread messages, calendar alerts, the constant suggestion that something needs attention. Staying slightly alert becomes a form of competence. And it works, at least on the surface. Problems get handled, deadlines are met, you appear capable. There's comfort in that, safety, a sense of control. What makes this especially convincing is that it doesn't feel like strain, it feels like responsibility. But notice something subtle. When control is always present, when alertness never fully switches off, it stops being an action. It becomes a posture. Not tense enough to alarm you, not relaxed enough to disappear. Just there. And because everyone around you is standing the same way, it doesn't stand out. Until one quiet moment makes you wonder what all this steadiness is actually standing on. Have you noticed how quickly the mind tries to understand a moment, instead of staying with it? A conversation ends. Before the silence settles, you replay what you said, what they meant, what could have gone differently. You call this reflection, it sounds healthy. Or take rest. You sit down after a long day, your body finally touches the chair. And immediately, the mind checks in. Am I relaxed yet? Why am I still tired? What do I need to do to feel better? Nothing wrong with these questions, they're familiar, almost automatic. But something curious happens here. The moment is still unfolding, and you've already stepped outside of it to observe it. understanding becomes a substitute for contact. It feels like being present because attention is involved, but it's a thin attention. Slightly ahead of experience, slightly managing it. Like watching your own life through a clean pane of glass, safe, clear, and not quite touched. And sometimes, in very ordinary moments, a breath you didn't plan, a pause you didn't choose, that glass isn't there. There's no comment, no adjustment, just sensation, arriving and leaving on its own. It doesn't last long, and it doesn't announce itself. But it leaves behind a quiet question. Was anything missing in that moment before understanding stepped in? What if the most reliable part of your day is the one you almost never pay attention to? Think of how you wake up, not the alarm, not the thoughts that rush in, but that brief moment before names return, before plans, before memory fully assembles. There is a simple sense of being here, unremarkable, undramatic. Nothing to manage yet. That same sense is present later in the day, when you're driving on a familiar road and arrive without remembering each turn, when your hands know how to type before words are chosen, when you're listening and forget yourself for a few seconds. Life is moving, and something in you is moving with it without instruction. It doesn't tense when plans change, it doesn't relax when things go well, it doesn't comment at all. It's easy to overlook because it doesn't demand attention, it doesn't complain, it doesn't need reinforcement. And yet, it's the only thing that has been here from the beginning of the day to the end. Not impressive, not fragile. Just steady enough that everything else can come and go. You don't have to decide what this is, just notice how rarely it wavers, even when you do. If that quiet steadiness is there, what happens when something emotional appears? Say a comment lands the wrong way, not cruel, just sharp enough to stay with you. You feel it in the body first, a tightening, a heat, a slight pull inward. Usually, the mind steps in quickly, it names the feeling, explains it, decides what to do with it. But before all that, there's a brief window. The feeling is present, clear, alive. And that steady background hasn't moved. The same thing happens socially. You're in a room where opinions differ, energy shifts, someone holds power, someone withdraws. You notice yourself adjusting tone, posture, words. Yet underneath the adjustment, there's something untouched by the room. It isn't resisting, it isn't agreeing, it's simply aware that the room is happening. Even inwardly, when a familiar pattern shows up, doubt, urgency, the need to get somewhere. The movement is obvious, but what it moves through is quiet. When this is noticed, emotions don't disappear. Social dynamics don't soften magically. Inner habits don't dissolve on command. But they're no longer the whole picture. They're events, passing weather. And something in you has been watching weather change for a very long time. Have you noticed what happens when you stop trying to arrive somewhere inside yourself? Not during meditation, not in a special moment, but in ordinary pauses. Waiting for the elevator, standing in the shower, staring out the window without checking the time. For a few seconds, there's nothing to improve, nothing to fix, nothing to hold together. The body is standing, breathing happens, sounds come and go. Effort doesn't drop because you decided to relax. It drops because it's no longer needed. The same thing happens at night. You lie down, the day hasn't been resolved, some questions remain open, and still sleep comes. Not because everything was handled, but because something deeper didn't require handling. Life keeps going even when you step aside. Heart beating, cells repairing, dreams forming. You trusted this once, without thinking about it. Every night. And maybe the question isn't how to live without tension, but what part of you has been living without it all along? Quietly. While the rest of you stayed busy. At some point, it becomes clear that life was never asking you to keep everything under control. What you've been calling effort may have been attention looking in the wrong direction. There is a quieter way things continue. You've seen it in rest, in moments you didn't orchestrate, in the ease that appears when you stop checking on yourself. Nothing needs to be added to that. Nothing needs to be protected. You don't have to remember it all the time. It shows up on its own whenever you stop interfering. So maybe tonight, or sometime tomorrow, notice the instant before you adjust yourself. The breath before a response, the pause before a thought. Not to hold it, just to see it. And then let the question stay opened. What in you has been steady enough to carry every moment so far?